Namaskar. Today I am going to talk about Vishuddha chakra. Already we have covered 4 lower chakras, and as you remember, the 3 chakras below, they represent the stage of animality, the most primitive basic drives in our psychology. And then Anahata chakra is a transitional stage, the stage of humanness, the stage between animality and divinity. And then from Vishuddha chakra and above, we are entering into the stage of spirituality, the stage of divinity. So Vishuddha is actually here the spiritual energy becomes quite manifest. The mind becomes free from the influence of material world. It becomes expanded. So from being very much personal, encapsulated into the shell of our personalities, from being bounded by time, space and person, we come to the stage where the mind is free from that bondage, when the mind becomes expanded. The mind no more moves along the lines of selfishness. Mind is motivated by selfless desires, no? Selfless motivations. So Vishuddha chakra contains the most noble and spiritual tendencies of the human mind. Vishuddha chakra also, when the mind reaches that stage, when the energy of the mind reaches the Vishuddha chakra, then a special so-called supernatural capabilities of the mind gets awakened. Supernatural, they're so-called supernatural because nothing is supernatural, everything is natural. But something is very rare, so that is why people call it supernatural. I will touch a little bit on that later on. So Vishuddha chakra is the 5th center. 5th center, and it is, in Sanskrit, Vishuddha means pure. Purity is the key factor. So it is pure from the influence of the material energy. All the vrittis of the Vishuddha chakra, they are basically noble. They are not degenerating, they are not primitive, they are not crude. They are very high and elevating vrittis. Vishuddha chakra on the physical level, it is connected with thyroid and parathyroid glands. These glands, they are very crucial to our body. They play a very vital role. Like if thyroid gland is over-secreting its hormones, then there is a sickness called hyperthyroidism, which has symptoms like insomnia, too much of appetite, and then loss of weight, and then palpitation, increased breath rate, and so on. And then if the hormones are not too much but too little, there are opposite symptoms. Gaining weight, constipation, heavy menstrual bleeding, and many different symptoms are there. So, and it's also found that this thyroid gland plays a very important role in the formation of the brain and in the development of the intellect. According to the yoga science, according to the tantric science, Vishuddha chakra is responsible for the awakening of pointed intellect. Due to the Vishuddha chakra, mind becomes very sharp, the mind becomes very focused, and that kind of mind may attain higher truth. So Vishuddha chakra is very, very important. Vishuddha chakra is symbolized by a white elephant. You remember maybe in the Muladhara chakra there was symbol black elephant. Very strong, powerful animal, but black. Energy is so powerful, the primal, primitive force of our mind, the physical desire. But that energy is not sophisticated, not domesticated, not regulated, not controlled. And that is why that energy may be of, very easily may be of a destructive nature. But in the Vishuddha chakra, the same animal, elephant, but it has become white. It has become, holy. Same very powerful energy like when you reach the motivations of the Vishuddha chakra, drives are very strong, they're very powerful, they're very motivating, strong energy. You feel that you can move the mountains, but that energy is of pure nature. It means it can never harm, it cannot be turned to harm the society, to harm the universe. That energy is mostly pure energy. That's why it is white elephant. Also, Vishuddha chakra, you remember there was, each chakra controls one material factor. In yoga philosophy, there is this understanding that this material universe is composed of 5 factors. Sometime later I will explain it a little bit in a more elaborate way. That each atom, each molecule is containing 5 elements: solid, liquid, luminous, aerial, and ethereal. So Vishuddha chakra controls that ethereal element within the microcosm. Ether is, you can think of it as of empty space. That empty space, that vacuum, it cannot be registered by the sense organs or by the instruments that we manufacture. But still we live within that empty space. The whole universe is sheltered within that empty space. And that empty space itself is considered to be the most subtle material element. So, and that is, it is considered to be material, not abstract, due to one thing, that this element transmits the vibration of the sound. The waves can travel through the space. So that is why it is considered to be material. Otherwise, it is already, in the realm of the mind. So these waves, the waves are considered to be a sound. So sound is controlled by Vishuddha chakra. It has to do something with the sound. Vishuddha chakra is responsible for the sense of hearing, and also it is responsible for producing the sound. So here we have a vocal cord, and once the Vishuddha chakra is properly developed, if it is balanced, then the voice becomes beautiful. Not only voice, but the entire vocal expression becomes charming, becomes beautiful. Also, a person acquires the ability to sing well, and then with his singing, with his speaking, or her singing, her speaking, may charm, may fascinate others, the people who will be listening. Actually, this is one part of one tendency, one quality of Vishuddha chakra, that special quality of the voice. I will talk a little bit later on that. So Vishuddha chakra is controlling ether element, controlling hearing, controlling production of the sound, and it is symbolized by its white elephant, is connected with thyroid and parathyroid glands, and it is responsible for the formation of proper intellect. It is when the Vishuddha chakra is developed, also person becomes rational. It is also a bit connected with the mustaches. When this center is developed, the mustaches, they grow more intense. Actually, I have experienced that when the people, they start to practice sadhana, spiritual practice, their beard and their mustaches, and also the hair on the chest and different hairs of the body, they start to grow a little bit more intense because of the change secretion of the hormones. There is a change in the external appearance. Anyway, it's a different topic. Okay, so Vishuddha chakra has 16 petals. It's located here, like in the male, where there is this Adam apple, just here, and female also a little bit the same, is about the same position at this level. Not here, but here. that is the physical location. And Vishuddha chakra has 16 petals, 16 vrittis, 16 tendencies. Actually, those vrittis, they are very, very subtle, and it's difficult to just mark them with a certain emotion. They are complex. Rather, they are creating sort of orchestra, of emotional orchestra. With those vrittis, the more tangible emotions are getting activated. But still, somehow few emotions can be explained. Okay, first, already I started to explain. First is about the pleasantness of the voice. It is not a particular emotion, but it's just the feeling of compassion within the voice, within the vocal expression. I remember one time I was attending a spiritual lecture, and the person who was speaking, he was addressing the large crowd of Hindi-speaking people, and he was naturally speaking Hindi. And at that time I could not understand one word that he was saying. And then, but still, I would not like to go away, because something in his voice was so beautiful, so attractive, so captivating, that I was just enjoying sitting there, doing meditation, sometimes opening my eyes, sometimes closing my eyes. It was very beautiful. I was surprised. How come? I don't understand one word, but still I'm so fascinated with that delivery of that, actually that compassionate, loving energy is attracting us. Also, when I listen to the audio tapes, to the audio recordings of the voice of my guru, of my spiritual teacher, of our Grand Master, his voice is so filled up with compassion. So when you hear it, your mind starts to dance with that, and the mind elevates. It's just like a music. The mind comes into the spiritual realm. That is a rare quality. Some people, they have that kind of special, unique charisma that captivates the listeners. And listeners, they just like anything. It doesn't matter what he talks about. It matters that feeling that is conveyed through the words. So that quality is called Amrita. Amrita means the nectar of immortality. So voice becomes full of sweetness. Voice carries you to the spiritual realm. That's called Amrita. So Vishuddha chakra is very much concerned with charisma. Charismatic people are the people who have somehow activated, who somehow tapped the resources of Vishuddha chakra. There is the opposite vritti also, and that vritti is called Vishaya. Vishaya means poison, nectar and poison. Only sweetness will not do. If someone is always so sweet with you, then the mind needs both. It needs the sweet and bitter. So the elevated souls, the teachers, the saints, the gurus, they use both. The ability to encourage, and ability to convey love, and also to scold, to be harsh. And then with these two abilities, the human mind is guided on the right path, on the proper path. I remember one time, one spiritual teacher, he was scolding his student. And his expression was so forceful and so powerful that I noticed that I kind of shrink like this. And I myself become terrified, though I was not the subject of, I was not the object of scolding. So, and then I was very impressed. Also, I have experienced with my teacher the same thing. So it is a valuable vritti of the mind. So the mind may showing both sides. One is the ability to reward and to bless and to express compassion, and another is the ability to chastise, to scold, to reform, to correct. So these are two sheltered in Vishuddha chakras. Then there are 7 sounds. Those 7 sounds, we are very familiar with them. It is Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do. And in Sanskrit they are called Sa, Ri, Ga, Ma, Pa, Dha, Ni, Sa. It is an octave. Sa, Ri, Ga, Ma, Pa, Dha, Ni. These sounds, they are taken from the names of the animals which produce the similar sounds. Sadaja, the peacock, Rishabha, Bull, Ga, Gandhara, goat, Ma, Madhyama, horse, Pa, Panchama, cuckoo, Da, Dhaivata, the donkey, and then Ni, Nichada is the elephant. So these 7 animals, 7 sounds. This musical scale, the music always played immense role in the spiritual science. The music, the beginning of the classical music is like 7,000 years ago. That time, Sadashiva, the father of yoga and tantra, he has introduced the science of music. He played his drum, he played his ektaravina instrument, which is like one-stringed type of guitar. So he played with that instrument, and he would intoxicate the minds of those primitive people, the minds of the listeners, and transport them into the spiritual realm. So the music was created, the classical music was created to bring the mind into the higher realm. When we listen to the music, it is very easy to become detached from the material world and to start to flow into the world of blissful musical, psycho-spiritual ideation. So there are notes, there are sounds of the notes in the Vishuddha chakra. These notes, it's very difficult to find out what is their exact emotional meaning, but the combination of the sounds, they are like a lock with many number combinations. So by creating different melodies, we start to flow into different feelings. Music is very ideational. With the music, just like in the kitchen, in the kitchen there are 6 tastes: sweet, sour, hot, astringent, salty, bitter. 6 tastes. And combining those tastes, we are creating dishes. So the more you are skillful in combining those tastes, the more delightful dishes you are producing. I find in the same way, really the special, the unique, talented composers, they are mixing the tastes of the soul. My spiritual teacher, he has written 5,018 songs, which he called Prabhat Samgita. And those songs, when you listen to them, sometimes they are sweet, sometimes they are sour, sometimes they are bitter, and sometimes they are both sweet and bitter, sweet and sour. And the music itself, just without even knowing the words, just listening to the melody, listening to the music, you find it is sour-sweet or sour-bitter, sweet-bitter, and your mind starts to flow into that delightful taste of musical ideation. It's very, very special. And it's very difficult to explain what is exact emotion. You just feel transported into the different realm of existence. So, and that is due to the presence of these roots, the acoustic roots, the key factors of the music within our Vishuddha chakra. And the music when we're listening to the melodies, that music tunes Vishuddha chakra in a special way, that you start to feel the taste, the special ideation, then the mind flows in the ideation. Also music, as it can be uplifting very much, and it also may be degenerating. With the music we may start to feel aggressive, we may start to feel lustful, we may start to feel restless, and so on. There will be so many tastes, different moods which we are diving into. And those moods are governed by the 7 notes here in the center. Okay, so Amrita, sweetness, Vishaya, bitterness, harshness. Then there is the 7 notes. Then there is a sound of Phat. Phat mantra. It was before used in tantric science to accelerate the completion of the action. It is a sound, it is a variety of practication, putting theory into practice. People with developed Vishuddha chakra, they're very practical, I find, in my personal experience. They're very practical. It is easy for them to fix anything. It is easy for them to materialize any idea. And a very, very important quality, actually. Because many people, they are good theoretical. You know, in the school, there are many smart people, but not... they're intelligent people, but not smart. Means in life, it is difficult for them. They're very theoretical. They're very abstract. Their theories, they never get implemented into the realities of this earth. So Vishuddha chakra makes you very much grounded, standing firmly on the earth. When I started to practice meditation, my parents, they were worried. They were thinking that I will become some kind of, lunatic, very much detached from this world and not practical. And actually I was like this. I was, when I was a boy, I was very much in my fantasies, very much in my own world. But when I started to practice meditation, I really noticed that I am changing and I'm becoming very much grounded, that I really enjoy being here and now in this present moment, and I really enjoy see my dreams come true in the external world, not just to live in the fantasy, but also implement, express your destiny, express what you have come to do in this world. So I feel really that meditation is developing all the chakras, and of course it is developing Vishuddha chakra, and also singing, spiritual singing is developing Vishuddha chakra, and person becomes grounded, becomes more practical. So the more this vritti is developed, the more the better ability he has to transform his idea into the practice. Okay, that is the vritti. Then there is the sound of hum. Both in Hindu Tantra and Buddhist Tantra, hum is considered to be the sound of sleeping divinity. It's called Kundalini in Tantra. That sleeping divinity is a special energy. One time we will have class on that also. That energy is sleeping within Muladhara chakra. In Buddhist Tantra, they call that Muladhara chakra as Mani Padma. So Om Mani Padme Hum. I remember that sleeping divinity within my Mani Padma, within my Muladhara chakra. So this Hum is the sound of awakening energy. One time we were doing collective meditation. First time I went to Europe, and there was big retreat, maybe 150 people were there, and we were doing meditation. And one teacher, he was sitting just in front of me. I was behind. And in meditation, all of a sudden, he is saying, I got scared. And then I was, internally I was upset with him. I thought, why you do like this? You are disturbing. You are creating disturbances in the practice of other people. Then I came home and I was doing meditation, and one day I was doing, and then mind became so much focused. I start to feel that some energy is awakening within me, and then all of a sudden I shout, I got myself surprised. Huh? What happened? So that sound is actually external expression. It may go without, means you may see it without sound, but that is the expression of the rising force. That force which is sleeping within Muladhara chakra, it start to move upwards, and you start to experience greater and greater expansion of the mind, and you start to experience the greater closeness to the beauty, greater peace also. But at the same time, you feel overloaded with energy. The feeling is similar as if you would, put your fingers into the electric current, into the socket, and would hold there. So your entire body is just being charged with that energy, and then energy is becoming too much, and when you are unable to hold anymore, then you shout, hum, hum. So sometimes it is a collective craziness. Someone is sitting and hum, and then other people, they also get inspired, and then their mind also becomes focused, their mind also becomes concentrated, and then he is also hmm, she is also hmm. Then sometimes it's beautiful, it's a spiritual kind of feeling, as if we are really attacking, we are really moving forcefully into the spiritual realm. So that feeling of rising, of summoning the energy, is the hum sound. Is also here. Then there is a sound of om. Many people believe that om is here, but om is here. The sound of om. Vishuddha chakra controls the ethereal factor. Agya chakra controls mind, but here is ethereal factor. Ethereal factor is the subtlest physical element of the universe, and that subtlest vast space is in itself is emitting a powerful vibration. That powerful vibration is the mother, is the causal matrix from which every other vibration is created. So in the philosophy, it is explained that there is a primal sound, and that primal sound is the sound of creation, sound of maintenance, evolution, existence, sound U, and then sound of dissolution, destruction, sound Ma. A, U, Ma. Those roots, acoustic roots together, they create sound Om. Om. That is the holy sound of Tantra. Om. That Om sound is sheltered within Vishuddha chakra. Once the mind rises above Vishuddha chakra, that sound becomes audible. Actually, that sound expresses in different chakras, but in a distorted way. Like in Muladhara, in Swadhisthana chakra, it expresses as crickets. Then it goes as ankle bells. Then it goes as a flute. Then it goes as the ocean. And then finally, when the mind rises above Vishuddha chakra, then you can hear undistorted, from the Vishuddha chakra, you can hear the undistorted Om sound. Actually, you don't hear it from the chakra, but it's like you hear it as a universe is singing that wave, no? That creates that waves. So Om sound is there in the Vishuddha chakra. And then, so three sounds, Phat, Hum, and Om. And then there are noble vrittis. One is called Vashat. That vritti is performing noble actions in the physical sphere. Expression of the mundane knowledge that you know how to improve, how to create better life, and you desire for the betterment of all. Like, I remember when I was, let's say, 12 years or 15 years, and our guru explains that according to biopsychology, the different stages of developments of the glands, and in that age that the Vishuddha chakra becomes active. And in that age I just was feeling that I really want that this world, that everyone will have enough to eat, will have house to sleep, will have clothes to wear. So that kind of desire, noble desire, I want everyone should be happy and everyone should have enough in the physical sphere. The philosophy of communism has appealed to that higher sentiment. Actually, communism is not something new in the teaching of Jesus Christ itself. He was propagating that idea that you should live as brothers and sisters, and you should live, for each other. So, so that noble sentiment, the communism could capture the mind of the people because of that appeal to this noble sentiment. Of course, this idea was not properly implemented, and there was distortion, that there was the defective philosophy behind. But people would sympathize with that philosophy because of this higher ideal. And then, of course, everyone feels that this is the way to live. Everyone should be happy. Not just the small group of people should be happy, but everyone should be happy. So that feeling for the welfare of all is sheltered in Vishuddha chakra. And if you keep Vishuddha chakra, active and balanced, you will feel that desire for selfless service. You will feel that motivation to live for the universal welfare. Then there is this another vritti, which is called Vausat. And that is the welfare in the psychic sphere. Happiness in the spheres of emotion. And then also the freedom from dogma, freedom from defective ideas, defective ideology. And motivated by that kind of vritti, people would become teachers. People would preach ideas, noble ideas. And that is very motivating. Sometimes people, they leave the world, they become nuns, they become monks, and then they give their life to the enlightenment of the society. And that is the motivation of here. Like when Soviet Union has broken up, and there was very difficult, actually, transitional period. It was transition from the communist system, planned economy, into the free market and the capitalist system. And now is okay, of course, it is normalized, but and that transitional period, there was lots of suffering, lots of poverty, and lots of difficulties. And but it was remarkable how people would react. Like many people would, like the school teachers, they would go to the school and do their job. Even the salary, the school there was no money, so the school was not able to give salary sometimes for 1 year, sometimes 1.5 years. So 1 year, 1.5 years, these people will go without salary, teaching, performing their duties. And then they would say, we are not doing it for money. But if we don't do this, what will happen to our children? What will happen to our country? What will happen to this, to the humanity? It is our duty to do. So that desire, selfless desire, I want the welfare. I want these people, they they be educated, they will blossom, they will attain success in their life. That is also from here. It is not a selfish motivation, which is from Manipura or Swadhisthana chakra. Anyway. So, yeah, very special. Then there is Swaha. Swaha is the universal welfare of all humans and animals. And Swaha is also like a sacrifice. Like in India, in Hindu religion, when they do sacrifice, they pour the butter into the fire. They say Om Swaha. Swaha means sacrifice. So in our psychology, there is a special tendency. Not only I want to serve, but I want to give part of myself. Maybe I will suffer difficulties due to that sacrifice, but I enjoy it. I enjoy that suffering for the sake of others. It gives me greater meaning. It gives me greater happiness. So that sacrifice. Actually, sacrifice, we can judge the spiritual status of the person. We can ascertain how far he moved or she moved ahead on the spiritual path. According to the development of the spirit of sacrifice, the more sacrifice in nature the person has, the more spiritual naturally he or she is. So sacrifice is very important. Sacrifice is one of the drives in the spiritual path. You learn how to sacrifice, because sacrifice is, what is sacrifice actually? Is a tapah. It means you choose between what is right and what is pleasant, and you do what is right. That is sacrifice. And then there is final. Final is Namaha. Namaha means self-surrender. Self-surrender. The mind is not anymore attached with the microcosm. So the microcosmic desires and drives, the desires of the maintenance of this mind and the body, they become secondary. And primary becomes the desire of the universal harmony. Let thy will be done. Let your will prevail. Let not my microcosmic will prevail. Let your macrocosmic will prevail. I surrender unto you. And in that surrender comes peace. In that surrender comes inspiration. So that is another quality of very important quality in Vishuddha chakra. Without we in the spirituality, the summum bonum of the spirituality is that feeling of self-surrender. Because if the mind surrenders to the benevolent cosmic force, then there will be no mistake. There will be no... the mind will move along the path of righteousness. The mind will move along the path of evolution. It has no chance to degenerate. So yogis, devotees, spiritual seekers, they work on that quality. They try to surrender. Constantly they try to surrender to the Supreme Entity. And that is by the merit, by dint of Vishuddha chakra, developed Vishuddha chakra. Without developed Vishuddha chakra, it will not happen. You will not feel it. You will not be inspired. What is this surrender? What is this sacrifice? What is this welfare of others? You will not be just... You will just not be able to feel, to grasp the glory of all those dimensions of the mind. The mind will move in the Manipura chakra, me, for me, mine, acquisition, these kind of things. But if the Vishuddha chakra is developed, then you will be able to grasp the glory of the spiritual life. Okay, so how will Vishuddha chakra be developed? Very simple devritis. No? First, Amrita and Visha, the nectar, sweetness of expression, compassion, love. Then Visha, harshness of expression, love, but through harsh approach, scolding and reprimanding. Then there is 7 sounds, which is sa, ri, ga, ma, pa, da, ni. Then 3 sounds, phat, the practication vritti, putting theory into practice. Hum, rising of the kundalini, inspiration, the sound of inspiration. I feel inspired, I feel aroused, I feel, charged to move ahead with my spiritual destiny. Then Om sound, the sound of creation, dissolution, and maintenance, the universal sound. The whole universe is here. The supreme energy, the supreme spiritual energy in the form of acoustic sound. And then finally there are these 4 noble vrittis, which is welfare in physical realm, welfare in the psychic realm, then sacrifice, and then finally self-surrender. These are the vrittis of Vishuddha chakra. So Vishuddha, you can see, it is very pure, it is very beautiful center. Also Vishuddha chakra is, once it is reached, then person acquires, first you can see the first development of the Vishuddha chakra. You will see that person acquires charisma, special magnetic force, kind of charm. He or she becomes attractive, as if there is a high voltage within him or her. Then further development of the Vishuddha chakra, it makes the mind, the one thing is that the mind will see through, because the mind is here above, is in the subtlest element of the universe, in the ether. So it is above the limitation of space and time and person. So the mind will see through time and space. So this omniscience, the seed of omniscience is here. The seed of seeing through space and time, knowing things that happened throughout the history without really reading about them. Like the gurus, like the saints, the special knowledge, knowing the objects which are spread through the timeline in the universe. So that ability is also there. And then there is this so-called Aishwarya. Aishwarya means occult powers. Occult powers. There are great occult powers, the powers which received by dint of practicing cult, and those powers, they are all shared here. I will not now talk about them because it is another topic of discussion. Anyway, I just mentioned that all these forces, they awaken when the Vishuddha chakra is controlled, activated, and when the energies of the mind is flowing through the Vishuddha chakra and not from below. Of course, it is requires the great concentration of energy. It is not a simple kind of attainment. And of course, yogis are not moving, not striving to achieve those forces, those powers. But it is a sign of a development. And once these powers, they come on the 3rd stage of the spiritual development, and once that 3rd stage is reached, then the final, the completion, the perfection and the spirituality is attained very fast. And yeah, it is already on the near the finish line. Okay, so Vishuddha chakra, everything is there, all the wealth, all the superhuman capabilities are there. So how to develop Vishuddha chakra? First of all, asanas, to some extent they balance Vishuddha chakra. Asanas which affect in this area. There is one asana called Sarvangasana, and is considered to be the queen of asanas, because sarva anga asana. Anga means the portion of the body, and sarva means the everything. So asana for every part of the body. Sarvangasana, and opposite asana is Matsya Mudra. They alternatively squeeze and then stretch this area, and then balancing the Vishuddha chakra properly. They're very powerful asanas. Then cobra to some extent, and then plow posture, energy posture, consciousness posture, half consciousness posture. These postures, they develop halasana, ardha, shivasana, ardha shivasana, tejasana. These postures also they develop Vishuddha chakra. Also, the very special way and very efficient way to develop, to tap the energies of Vishuddha chakra is to sing. Sing. Not only sing, but sing spiritual songs, and especially sing mantra. You remember in the basic course I taught you this practice called kirtan. When you sing this mantra, Baba Nam Kevalam, Baba Nam Kevalam, Baba Nam Kevalam, Baba Nam Kevalam, Baba Nam Kevalam. This kind of practice. And when you sing and all the time, I've noticed that when people sing, they become free from all the complexes. They really open up. Their spiritual beauty is blossoming within them. Then, of course, since the Vishuddha chakra is a very elevated center, we have to use the energies of the Vishuddha chakra to develop it. We need to do service and sacrifice. If we live the life of service, if constantly we dedicate our actions to the welfare of the universe, then we are always engaged with the Vishuddha chakras. We feel its motivations. We are not here, but here. We are engaged in that subtle flow of service and sacrifice, and that very much develops Vishuddha chakra. Then there is a breathing exercise called Akasha Mudra. When you breathe in through Vishuddha chakra, breathe out also through Vishuddha chakra. In the previous lectures I explained how to do, but with the different chakras. And then there are meditation lessons, number 3 and number 5. They are called Tattvadharana and Chakra Shodhana. Those lessons very much develop all the chakras. And actually, in general meditation, even the simple meditation I taught you, the basic meditation with Baba Nam Kevalam mantra, it's in a very powerful way develop all the chakras. So, with these methods, you are bound to develop to some extent, and then after some time fully develop Vishuddha chakra. I have seen, I experience in my day-to-day life, when you teach person meditation, after some times, really he starts to blossom. Even the voice changes, even the expression changes. It becomes full of magnetism, it becomes full of charm. So Vishuddha chakra is getting quickly developed through the practice of yoga and meditation. Also, there is this connection between the chakras, the glands. There is this endocrine glands, and then there is lymphatic glands. So lymphatic glands, there is a prescription in yoga. In joints, the hair is growing to protect that area, not to create too much heat, to take out the heat of the body, because when the hair are there, those hairs, they're cooling, they have the cooling effect. And then also not to cool down. When it is cold around, this hair, they protect also. So they maintain a proper temperature. And then the lymphatic glandular system is able to function properly. Once that system is going out of order, once that system is going disturbed, then it disturbs all other chakras also, and especially disturbs Vishuddha chakra. So keeping the joint hair is also very important prescription in yoga. Many people, they laugh at me when I say this, but actually it is very important. And now with my students, they have really grasped this idea. They experienced in their life. Sometimes they shaved, and then they felt the negative effect of that, and now they very firmly believing that yes, this must be kept. Even the girls, they say, the new girl is coming, and they say, "Are you shaving your armpits? Are you crazy?" Yeah, that is, they have experienced the usefulness of that prescription. So okay, I have explained a number of methods, enumerated them, and I explained about Vishuddha chakra. Vishuddha chakra is the seat of the noble tendencies of the human mind, is the seat of the greatness. Already here we can call ourselves spiritual beings if we have reached on the level of Vishuddha chakra. And from the Vishuddha chakra until the spiritual goal is very near. If we established in the noblest tendencies of the human mind, then already very soon we are realizing the final truth. So thank you very much. Practice yoga and meditation and develop all your chakras.